Good evening and welcome to Undaunted, bringing into the news untold stories. I am Star Smart. Let's begin. The need for the colonial government of French Cameroon to address the root cause of the immigration problem in the Cameroons lies within first addressing the war in Amazonia. Instead of focusing on other issues, La Republic's government should prioritize tackling the ongoing war in Amazonia. The displacements caused by the conflict has led to millions of people fleeing their homes, which is definitely a major concern. It is important for the government to address the underlying issues that are driving people to want to leave rather than just dealing rashly with its consequences. Another issue arising in major cities in Amazonia as a direct consequence of the ongoing 7 year long war is the scramble for farmland. The war continues and farmers are unable to access their land in the outskirts and villages. Amazonia could face a food crisis in the near future. Due to the threat to life posed by the activities of La Republic du Cameroon's forces, the innocent people of Amazonia, whose livelihoods depend on farming, have been forced to abandon their farmlands and seek shelter in centers. Now we wonder what is the way forward? Well, nothing but resolution. Let's dive into the footprint of that coming up right after the
Here are the prime headlines for tonight. The war in Amazonia projects food crisis in the days ahead. The war needs to stop now. Amazonian professors of Nigerian universities jailed in La Republic de Cameroon. Will the Tinubu government revisit the case? Is what we'll try to find out tonight. More regrets at colonial DDR centers as people recognize that they are scammed. CPDM Women's Day in Mpambe local government air being forced while other women are mourning, and Chantal Bier dancing. While Jean Nitachu, a La Republic de Cameroon political activist, and visits AyukTabe in Kenge prison. Visits. While in African news, Sudan's military declines events for Ramadan. On the foreign scene, Russia fields new hypersonic missile defense system for Ukraine's war. Now let's get the news in full briefings. Another issue arising in major cities in Amazonia as a direct consequence of the ongoing 7 year war is the scramble for farmland. If the war continues and farmers are unable to access their lands in the outskirts and villages, Amazonia could face a food crisis in the near future. Due to the threats to lives posed by the activities of La Republic de Cameroon forces, the innocent people of Amazonia, whose livelihood depends on farming, have been forced to abandon their farmlands and seek shelter in city centers. With the pressure to secure food, any available space by the roadside becomes an opportunity for farming. The occupation of such land along major streets like in Bamenda is based on a first come, first served basis. How long can a few bridges beside the streets in Bamenda sustain the population. Well, this is where we'll begin the feats of Andante tonight. Meanwhile, we have Dr. Patience Abiodun in the studio, and when the time is right, we'll definitely get you to meet her. How you doing, sir?
Oh, very well, Ogi. Good evening once again, Ambazonians. On board of Ambazonia risk encountering a food crisis in the days ahead if nothing is done to put an end to the present war that has forced farmers out of their fertile farmland. The ongoing war in Amazonia, which has forced farmers out of their fertile lands, is not resolved. Amazonians is at risk of facing a food crisis. As the war continues, the number of lands used for farming keeps decreasing due to insecurity. The insecurity is as a result of the activities of the Republic of Cameroon forces who target and kill youths and implement their policies in the peripheries and villages of Amazonia. This has led to a shift in population movement, which with an influx of people into city centers in Amazonia. These villages and the vast peripheral lands were the main sources of livelihoods for the Amazonian people, but the ongoing war has disrupted their ability to farm and sustain themselves.
Let's get into our major report for tonight, the Nera 10. Now, under the international human rights law, the principle of non-refoulement guarantees that no one should be returned to a country where they would face torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment, or punishment and other irreparable harm. This principle applies to all migrants at all times, irrespective of migration status. The principle of non-refoulement forms an essential protection under international human rights, refugee, humanitarian, and customary law. Its high point is that it prohibits states from training or removing individuals from their jurisdiction or effective control when there are essential grounds to believe that the person would be at risk of irreparable harm upon return. It has been over 6 since professors of Nigerian universities were arrested at Nera Hotel in Abuja, Nigeria. They were meeting to discuss the welfare of southern Cameroon's refugees who had fled for their lives into Nigerian territory when they were suddenly taken at gunpoint by about 20 armed men on the 5th of January 2018 with the aid of Christopher Fabena Anu, as later revealed by the Colonial Republic of Cameroon's Secret Service Chief, Colonel Bankwe Emile.
Well, these academics were handcuffed and held in an underground detention facility of the Department of State Services, the DSS, for 20 days. Later, they were repatriated to La Republic of Cameroon with the assistance of the administration of the then elements.
It is an oasis of unity in a world patched by discord, a visual whisper of a nation's promise. Of Ambazonia. From the azure embrace of the Atlantic reflecting from the Ambas Bay, the iconic Fako Mountain ascends with a silent, stoic grace, carving a silhouette against the sky. This towering sentinel is more than a geographical marvel. It is the heart of Southern Cameroon's stoic guardian of Amazonia, a symbol steadfast as the unyielding spirit manifests in the unity of the land's 13 counties. Encircling this earthen spire, a dove of peace edges its up, untouched and serene. As it soars with wings unfurled, it casts shadows upon the land, each feather a brushstroke of tranquility. Against the canvas of the heavens, 13 stars glimmer, a celestial acknowledgement of each county's shared dreams and harmonious virtues.
All right, sincerest apologies for that breakage there. We'll take back the report that I said is one of our major reports for tonight. Now, under the international human rights law, the principle of non-refoulement guarantees that no one should be returned to a country where they would face torture, cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, and other irreparable harm. This principle applies to all migrants at all times, irrespective of migration status. The principle of non-refoulement forms an essential protection under international human rights, refugee, humanitarian, and customary law. Its high point is that it prohibits states from transferring or removing individuals from their jurisdiction or effective control when there are substantial grounds for believing that a person would be at risk of irreparable harm upon return. It has been over 6 years since professors of Nigerian universities were arrested at the Nera 10 hotel in Abuja. They were meeting to discuss the welfare of southern Cameroon's refugees who had fled for their lives in the Nigerian territory when they were suddenly taken at gunpoint by about 20 armed men on the 5th of January 2018 with the aid of one Christopher Fabena Anu, as later revealed by Colonial La Republique de Cameroon Secret Service Chief Colonel Bang.
Oh, well, these academics were handcuffed and held in an underground detention facility of the Department of State Services, the DSS, for 20 days. Later, they were repatriated to La République du Cameroon with the assistance of the administration of then President Muhammad Buhari, even though they were legally resident in Nigeria as refugees and registered asylum seekers. Now, we have seen that under international law, it is a crime. Are they still being held? Femi Falani, a lawyer in Nigeria, had advised the Buhari administration to redirect the efforts of the State Security Service from President Paul Biya's proxy war to collaborating with the Nigerian police force to tackle criminal elements causing chaos in the country. In the Cameroons, they were brought before a military tribunal, tried in French, even though they were English speaking with no provision of a translator, and sentenced to life imprisonment at the Kondegi Maximum Security Detention Facility with a fine of $525 million. Now, this action has been widely criticized globally. A federal high court in Abuja on March 1st, 2019 and November 28th, 2019 recognized the violations of their rights. The judge ruled that the state must pay 5 million naira, that is about 13,800 US dollars, to each detainee for violating their fundamental rights, including the right to life, dignity, fair hearing, health, freedom of movement, and association. Additionally, 200,000 naira in damages were awarded for deportation. The court issued a perpetual injunction against further violations and ordered the deportees return to Nigeria promptly.
Well, the UN Human Rights Special Procedures Working Group based in Geneva, Switzerland, earlier called on the government of the Cameroons to release them because of the violation of their human rights, citing that the manner in which their complainants were arrested, detained in Nigeria, transferred to the Cameroons, detained, tried, and sentenced to life imprisonment violated various international laws to which both La République du Cameroon and Nigeria are signatories to. The group also asked that La République du Cameroon and Nigeria remedy the situation and accord them an enforceable right to compensation and other reparations in accordance with international law. Heather Nauert, the U.S. Department of State spokesperson, emphasized that the actions of Nigeria and La République du Cameroon violated the detainees' rights by forcibly repatriating them. She urged both governments to adhere to their international obligations and refrain from such actions. Many rights groups have criticized their imprisonment, calling for their release, but years down the line, they are still in detention. Ogaba Oma, a legal practitioner, explains that refugees in Nigeria are afforded various legal rights through both national and international instruments. Not just that, the National Refugee Commission Act of 1989 establishes fundamental protections, including non-refoulement, access to basic needs like food and shelter, the right to work, and education within national regulations and freedom of movement within Nigeria.
Internationally, Nigeria is bound by the Refugee Convention of 1951, which reinforces these rights. Additionally, refugees are protected under the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhumane, or Degrading Treatment and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. However, challenges persist in the consistent implementation of these rights, sometimes resulting in difficulties for refugees in accessing services and opportunities. Registration with the National Refugee Commission is essential for accessing these rights and protections. Oga explained that registering with the National Refugee Commission is crucial for accessing rights and protections, and that implementation of these rights can sometimes be inconsistent, and refugees may face challenges accessing services or opportunities, as in this case. Speaking on how they were tried, he said the Universal Declaration of Human Rights states that everyone has the right to understand the charges raised against them and the right to a fair trial. This generally includes the right to have the proceedings translated into a language the defendant understands.
If the military tribunal cannot in La République du Cameroon, this is because international and regional human rights standards, both the African Charter of Human and People's Rights and International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, stipulate that civilians should be tried in ordinary civilian courts. Trying civilians in military courts is generally seen as a violation of their right to fair trial and a violation of their human rights. In La République du Cameroon's Military Justice Code generally limits the jurisdiction of military tribunals to military personnel and offenses committed while on duty. However, in practice, La République du Cameroon has been criticized for trying civilians in military courts, particularly on terrorism charges. The 2014 terrorism law has been used to bring charges against human rights defenders and others before military tribunals, often with unfair trials and harsh sentences. This practice has been condemned by human rights groups and international bodies.
Well, overall, while it is generally prohibited under international and national law, the practice of trying civilians in military courts does occur in La République du Cameroon, particularly with terrorism charges. This practice has been widely criticized as a violation of human rights. The Southern Cameroon's Amazonian activist held in detention to one, we have JuliusAyukTabe, the vice president of the American University of Nigeria, information technology expert, human rights activist, and philanthropist. The second, Augustine Che Abusom, professor of surgery, Department of Veterinary Surgery and Diagnostics Imaging, Amadou Bello University, fellow of the College of Veterinary Surgeons, Nigeria. The third, Blaise Young Servizim, a barrister at law, human rights advocate, solicitor, and notary public. The fourth, Cornelius Njikimbi Kwanga, PhD in economics, and senior lecturer Umaru Musa, Yaradua University.
We have the fifth, Egbe Okok Ntui, who has his PhD in engineering and associate professor of structural engineering at Bayero University. Elias Ebai Eyambe is the sixth. He is barrister at law, advocate, solicitor, and notary public. We have Fidelis Ndeiche, who has a PhD in engineering and also an associate professor and IT engineer at the American University of Nigeria. The eighth is Henry Tata Kimen, who is an associate professor of civil engineering department of architecture at Amadou Bello University. The ninth, Dr. Nfongala, he's a political scientist and also an author. And the tenth, Wilfred Fombang Tasang, who was a secondary school teacher and a trade union leader. Well, sadly, they've been jailed. But we've heard from the report that under the international law, it is actually a crime. We have Dr. Patience Abiodun here in the studio. Of course, she's our mother here. Good evening, ma'am. How are you doing?
Good evening, Mr. Smart. Good evening, Onye Pala. Thanks for having me here today on the Undaunted. I'm doing fantastic. Yes, so this month is International Women's Month, but talking about our brothers that have been held in La République dungeon for almost 6 years is very daunting. And you've already gone through the news explaining how the both Nigerian governments and La République du Cameroon failed international laws for repatriating refugees that were in Nigeria, minding their own business, to deliberate on the affairs of Southern Cameroons. And both government, and I believe really that France was really behind this unfair activity. So we hope that the international community is putting an eye on this. You've already mentioned the International United Nations Human Rights Committee should be putting an eye on this. The international labor organizations, because these are all international bodies that are supposed to be in charge of unfair treatment. We all have rights. Every single person have rights for association, rights, freedom of speech. And when two governments conspire to carry out such an activity, it's up to these international bodies to bring them to book. And I don't understand why for so many years, the Nera 10 international forcing that release. I saw recently you just put the news of the US representative saying something, but speaking is one thing and doing something about it is something else. I don't understand why nothing concrete has been done till today to ensure that they are released. At least have a fair trial.
All right. Now, look at what is happening. Under the international law, it is very wrong. And you, as someone who is very interested when it comes to issues of, refugees and all of that, you've done that with your whole heart. What is the position of the government led by President Samuel Ikone Sako on this, knowing that on all angle, this particular move is wrong and they've been jailed for quite a while now? What is the government's position on this? What is the government doing about this?
Okay, thank you for that question. I must admit that I don't really have the details because our lawyers, Barrister Nso and Barrister Besa and Barrister Ghana and Barrister Elad, are more knowledgeable on this particular matter. Or as I can say as a mother, as a woman, because most of these gentlemen have wives and children. And as a mother in the house, all I can say is that we all need to work as a government to put pressure to both the government of La République du Cameroon, the government of Nigeria, and the key international bodies that are very important in handling matters of this nature to react and react sooner than later. Because these gentlemen are perishing. Kundigi is no joke. You have people packed in quarters like sardine, and they are all likely to contract illnesses, diseases. So that is an inhumane way of treating people. You listed how most of these individuals are highly educated men that very, very did constructive work for their communities as lecturers, as engineers, as teachers. And they have been cut off the these communities for so many years. So you asked me a question on what the government is doing. You see, looks okay, good. Looks like we're frozen for a moment. So I'm sure the government is doing something behind the scenes, but I'm not very privy to exactly the details. But I know that we will not leave our brothers forsaking our brothers. Thank you.
Dr. Patience, talking about how they're packed in Kondegi, how they really, it's a show of how La Republic does not value human lives, and neither do they even value their own laws. Now, looking at the status quo on ground, these men have been in that Kondegi for about 6 years now. Do you think there are any legal possibilities for these Amazonian leaders like anytime soon?
Yes, there's always a possibility. Things are really changing very quickly in Africa. I started by saying that I believe France is really behind this because let's think about it. Why were they arrested in the first place? Let's always go back to the beginning. They were arrested because of pressure from France, because the goal was to stop the liberation movement of Amazonia. So they felt that if the head of the snake is cut, then the snake will automatically die. Unfortunate for them, they didn't realize that Amazonia has several heads. And so that the fact that this core that were the government at that time were all arrested and deported meant that the struggle would, I call it struggle at that time, now we're a government, full-blown government. They thought that that would have killed the urge of all Southern Cameroonians. I think they forgot really, Mr. that on October 1st and September 22nd, when people came out in mass on the streets, that was a revolution. It was telling they're not going back. So cutting the snake, or the head of the snake, other heads came up, and that's what they failed. So France is behind this. And with the changes happening in Africa, with all these African countries like Mali, Burkina Faso, their leaders showing that they can withstand France and be able to take care of their people, that tells us Amazonians that we too will be able to do what is in our power to make sure that the Nera 10 go free. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Madam Patience.
All right, thank you so much, my Patience. We have our reports would want you to, share your thoughts on. Just stick with us as we proceed with the rest of the reports. All right, moving on. Let's talk about the DDR centers.
Apparently, more regrets are growing over there. A tenant in colonial DDR center is starting to regret and believing that the La Republic is an illusion. Well, the first fake promise was a scholarship after betraying a warrior and Amazonian state army. And La Republique did not even fulfill the promise given to her after that betrayal. Lies and deception, as has been seen, are the principles on which the La Republique colonial government seem to operate from. If this colonial government is not dishing out fake and never to be realized promises, they will be sowing seeds of discord among the peoples of Amazonia.
Well, many Amazonians have fallen for some of La Republique de Cameroon lies and deception and are regretting it today. Tenants of the colonial disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration centers are expressing regrets to have been fooled by La Republique de Cameroon, colonial forces, and administrators.
Oh, well, in another show of regret, an ex-combatant, Joyce, not her real name for security purposes, is a tenant of the Bamenda Colonial Disarmament, Demobilization and Reintegration, the DDR Center, who regrets believing in the La Republique du Cameroon's colonial forces and government. Joyce, deceived some years ago, assisted the colonial La Republique du Cameroon's terrorizing forces to kill an Amazonian state army by exposing their whereabouts. She stated that one of the said Amazonian state army was her old friend, actually, a friendship that she stated started way before the advent of the ongoing war. When the war started and her friend took up the responsibility to defend homeland, she was kidnapped by the terrorizing force and deceived into disclosing the whereabouts of her friend, something that she obliged to in a costly ignorance that cost her the loss of her friend's life, amongst other Amazonian State Army.
Well, according to her, the colonial company commander of Ndop told her that if she did not show him where her friend was hiding, he would burn down her father's compound. He says if she cooperates, he will make sure she's sent to another town and sponsored in school. Well, after the operation that led to the killing of her friend, she was abandoned as the colonial commander never kept to his promise. Well, by this deception, Joyce joined the Amazonian State Army to avenge the death of her friend, an objective that to her was well executed. Well, After clearing her conscience of having avenged the killing of her friend, she thought of going back into society and continuing with her dreams. This desire to reintegrate into civilian life by all means made her gullible to another lie from the colonial government. She fell for the fake gospel being preached about the colonial disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration centers in Amazonia. The fake message was that it was centered on empowering ex-combatants and reintegrating them into the society. While Joyce is today unable to forgive herself or allow herself to be fooled twice by the colonial government after years in the DDR center in Bamenda. No sign of reintegration in the future, as none before her has been reintegrated. Her desire today to be found or to find an escape route out of the center where they are presently caged.
Oh, well, a lot of the times we have seen La République and its terrorizing forces intimidate and threaten civilians into selling their brothers and sisters out. And with such life threatening situations, it becomes a case of your life or the other person's life, a very sad situation to be in. Well, it's also very disheartening to hear that even after the first lie that this said Joyce fell for, she fell for another deception from the colonial government, especially seeing how La République never keeps to their promise. It is only unwise for any Amazonian to betray their brothers and sisters over promises of La République du Cameroon. Worse still is that those promises are never fulfilled. Joyce's experience highlights the need to avoid any type of dealings with La République. As has been repeatedly said, trust La République at your own risk.
Oh well, let's get to the first Women's Day in Nkambi. Well, before we get into the report, I want you to see a particular video of women in black. These women are supposed to be celebrating the Women's Day. But this is what happened. Now, according to the woman, she's saying, we are not at ease. There is war. Children are great and life is expensive. Life is difficult. With so much pain in her voice, she's saying it is not working. We are in lack to express our indignation with the country. We are not happy with what is happening. We are very sad. Well, she's going on to say other things. She's going on to say we cannot even send our children to school, and even when we do, when they graduate, there is no work. The children come again and begin to bother us at home or in the markets to make ends meet. And we continue to nurse graduates like babies in order to contain them at home, else they go to the streets. What is there to celebrate about Mother's Day? What is there to celebrate about Women's Day when nothing is changing, nothing is new, when we are suffering? So we have decided to come in black to cry out today. Now, these are women in Douala of neighboring La Republic to Cameroon. Some women, as you can see, they have given reasons which you heard for snubbing Women's Day celebration, saying that women suffer a lot in the Cameroons to make ends meet for their families, and besides being victims of rape, discrimination, gender-based violence, and yet government does not defend them in their vulnerabilities. Meanwhile, in the Unity Palace of La Republique du Cameroon, we are seeing a fourth celebration with just a few women in attendance. Now, let's see. These are women in Yaoundé crying. Meanwhile, in the Unity Palace, A few women are seen dancing. Let's see that video.
Maintenant, quand on finit même avec la scolarité, ils arrivent même, peut-être ils ont même le bac, ils vont même
Now, the question is, how many mothers can you see there? And what exactly are they excited about if in the same environment some other women are crying? Well, how can the mother of a nation celebrate when her fellow mothers are mourning? That is a question begging for answer.
Well, in Nkambe, barely a few weeks after the bomb explosion that killed 2 and injured many in Nkambe local government area, the colonial La Republic government retightened security, reinforced Ngala Gerald CPD and vigilante groups using bribe to entice the gullible and vulnerable population to come out and march on a so-called International Women's Day with tears still in their eyes. Reports from Nkambe say there were at least 2 colonial La Republic soldiers per meter on a range of about 20 kilometers from the road leading to Misage local government area, cutting across Nkambe town, and that the grandstand seriously militarized with every soldier armed to the teeth, and others, including vigilantes in plainclothes, all to blindfold the world that there is normalcy in the area. Well, if there was normalcy, would the people need the military in a civilian activity? Well, information gathered says Ngala Gerald donated 500 Women's Day fabric worth 5 million francs CFAs to women in Nkambe and 1 million francs CFAs cash offer for the refreshment to entice these poor and vulnerable women of Nkambe to display peace plans stating that they have wiped away the sad memories of February 11th, 2024, forging ahead in peace.
Right, remember, we still have Dr. Abiedo in the studio, and right after this particular report, we'll definitely bring her to share her thoughts on all of these other reports. Now, let's talk about the La Republique du Cameroon political flag. Now, in a world of uncertainties and insecurities, in a time when Amazonians are forced in a revolution to get her independence and her people the desired freedom it requires, every move must be observed and investigated. Over the weekend, Undaunted was informed about a visit. Jean-Michel Ninchu, who is president of the FCC and coordinator of the APC, visited Mr. Sisiku JuliusAyukTabe on Saturday, the 9th of March, 2024, who was unlawfully detained at the main prison of the Kondengi. The question is, what could be the main aim of such a visit? We would like to know the objectives, that is, the true intent of the meeting, not what people say, the true intention of the meeting. Now, this is not the first time such visits are happening. Information gathered proves that several meetings were held before now in 2019, including one with Banquet, and they all fruitless. Another question is, does AyukTabe still have power to dictate the direction of the Amazonian resolution and revolution at the moment? And so, why meet with him when others leaders are available to be met?
Well, Undaunted also gathered that the interview and main focus was on the crisis, which has continued to get bogged down. During the discussions, Mr. AyukTabe, who was surrounded by executives from his movement, used the opportunity to reiterate his proposals for a way out of the crisis, which are: 1, the release of all English-speaking, that is Amazonian, prisoners arrested in connection with the crisis, and 2, the opening of a frank and inclusive political dialogue bringing together all the protagonists of the crisis. Although Jean-Michel Ninchu said he intends to continue to meet in order to achieve a definitive resolution of the Amazonian war. which is also, it should be remembered, has already caused more than 60,000 deaths, as well as hundreds of thousands of internally and externally displaced persons. But we sincerely doubt that reasons behind this move, what they really are. What Amazonians need to know is that Jean-Michel Ninchu is a political flirt and owner of a party he created to make business with. He has never used that party and has always been trying to flirt between the SDF of late Frundi, from where he benefited to get into parliament, or Maurice Kamto's MRC seeking for notice. Like his brother Kamto, no Amazonia should expect anything from him.
Well, analytically, we also see this as a political doublespeak. Jean-Michel Ninchu might again or gain some political points once more with this kind of moves. You can never tell. Is it right for him to consult a prisoner serving a life term? If Ninchu had the power and authority, why hasn't he released him? Think about it. This may just be a ploy to rope some gullible Amazonians to endorse La République du Cameroon leadership appointment process. By this, La République du Cameroon will claim that we have given up our independence project. Now, this is more like a warning. No genuine Amazonian should blink on this again. Well, we still have our mother, Ma Abiedo, in the studio.
All right,
Thank
still
you.
about the report, we just gave another update of the Nera 10, and this time around it is Jean-Michel Ninchu who is making another political move, trying to get another political point for himself, going to see Sisiku JuliusAyukTabe. Now, what we're wondering, as you just heard from our intelligence report, it is already alleged that the cabal in Yaoundé is still positioning individuals and proxies to corner former President Sisiku JuliusAyukTabe in an attempt to manipulate him against the Amazonian Liberation Movement. Dr. Abiedowi would like to know, does Sisiku JuliusAyukTabe and co. still have the political capital La République is hoping to take advantage of? What do you really think Yaoundé hopes to achieve with these unrelenting efforts?
Thank you, Ms. Tah, for that question. I think La République is frustrated and is trying by all means to position AyukTabe as the leader. They understand that President Sako, who has already gone out to tell the world that we are now a government, is running the show. But the La République government is trying by all means to deceive the international community that the rightful leader is AyukTabe, so that the agenda, which has been all along to call for a referendum, will be pushed forth by AyukTabe in order that the Nera 10 could be set free. I think, I don't have the facts, but I'm thinking that these are maneuvers so that those who've been in prison for such a long, they may think that, oh, we don't want to stay any longer. Maybe we should just cooperate with La République and tell Southern Cameroonians that the best course of action, in their opinion, would be to settle for some sort of a referendum. They are wasting their time because the international community knows that President Sako is running the show, is the president of the government of Southern Cameroon's Amazonia. They know that our Amazonia State Army, ASA, are there on the ground defending our territory. They know that when the people of Southern Cameroon came out in mass on October 1st, 2017, there was no turning back, because this is a result of over 60 years of abuse. And AyukTabe knows that also. I've always mentioned that if AyukTabe really wants to be free, all he has to do is project what Mandela did. He just has to tell the international community that we are prisoners. The Nera 10 are prisoners. Please, if you want this war to come to an end, which has to be on the negotiation table, like the resolution from the Senate in America, the S Resolution 684 says that the root cause of the war has to be determined, then all he needs to do is tell them that you are talking to the wrong people. The rightful person to talk to is President Sako. I think the sooner he realizes this, the better for him, because the longer he continues to maintain that he has any authority to speak on the behalf of Southern Cameroonians, he's just delaying his inevitable problem to stay in jail for a long time. That's really what I think.
Right now, talking about President Sako's involvement in the release of the Nera 10. Now we understand that from research we just did here briefly, we understand that prior to the Nera 10 coming out of Incommunicado, the government of Amazonia then, they were known as the interim government, spent over $100,000 in legal fees alone. Now, that aside, do you think that diplomacy at this time will help?
Absolutely. Diplomacy is always important, because without diplomacy, how do you go and have the possibility of both parties sitting on that table? Diplomacy is paramount. So, and I believe President Sako and the key elements that are in the government that are mostly our legal minds are doing a lot behind the scenes to make sure that the international community understands that we have prisoners of conscience languishing in La Republic, and that we have refugees all over the world, that we have internally displaced people, and also people that are also in La Republic. We don't want to really call those internally displaced, because our own boundary, Southern Cameroons, is really Southern Cameroons, former West Cameroons. So those of our people that are living in La Republic to Cameroon are not really internally displaced. They are just there. You probably will consider them maybe as refugees, or they are staying there because they think that they are safer there. Anyway, with that said, I think that diplomacy is the where to go. That's where this war will finally come to a head, because without diplomacy, you continue butting heads and there will be no conclusion. So diplomacy, Ms. Onye, to answer your question, is very important.
All right, thank you so much, Ma'am Patience. Well, it is clear that Amazonians are certainly disinclined to any move by Ayuk JuliusAyukTabe from the Kondeyi prison in Yaoundé. But do you think that there will be more coherence within the liberation movement if AyukTabe chooses to offer his unwavering support to President Sako? And could that facilitate its release instead of having backdoor meetings?
Absolutely. I really believe that the day AyukTabe comes out and tells the international community that I was mistaken, I was too proud, I thought that I was doing the right thing, whatever excuse he wants to give, the day he comes out and say that the government of Southern Cameroon has only one leader. Because mind you, we all believe that Southern Cameroons deserve to be recognized internationally as a country. He says that that's what he believes. The Nera 10 say that that's what they believe. So Their actions do not show that. Their actions show that they are selfish. So if he were to come out, and it's never too late to do that, if he were to come out and say that he was mistaken, that all along he should have supported President Sako from the get-go, I think it will take us closer to putting our flag in Buea without any. I really believe so.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, my patients. So we are very delighted to have you here tonight. Right, coming up next
Thank you.
is
You're welcome.
African
My pleasure.
Reports. You're welcome.
Oh, well, on the African scene, we have Rwandan refugees concerned about a recent extradition treaty. The Mozambican parliament recently approved an extradition treaty with Rwanda, despite concerns about potential persecution of exiled dissidents. The treaty allowed for the exchange of information between the two countries' justice systems. Mozambique aims to prevent criminals from finding refuge while ensuring the fair treatment of law-abiding individuals. The exiles are concerned about the extradition treaty because they fear that it could be used by the Rwandan government to persecute dissidents who are currently in exile. This concern is based on the history of targeting opponents in exile and allegations of persecution by the Rwandan government. Human Rights Watch has also reported cases of disappearances, killings, and kidnappings of Rwandans in Mozambique. The treaty allows for the exchange of information between Mozambique and Rwanda, which raises concerns about the safety and well-being of those who oppose the Kigali government.
Well, amid the escalating tensions in Sudan, General Yasser Al-Attah, representing the military, has made a strong statement. He says there won't be a ceasefire during Ramadan unless certain conditions are met. This reflects the ongoing conflicts between Sudan's armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces, highlighting the complexities of the country's political situation. The military is demanding that the RSF withdraw from civilian areas, emphasizing their commitment to previous agreements and restoring order in Sudan. The conflict has caused immense damage, displacing communities and destroying infrastructures. Achieving peace will be challenging considering the deep-rooted and mounting cities and humanitarian crisis immediately, and international actors are urging all parties to prioritize peace and humanitarian aid. General Yasser El-Attah's statement about no ceasefire during Ramadan unless certain conditions are met shows just how complex and challenging the political situations are.
Well, still on the African scene, we'll take a look at another situation with Sudan, as the situation is still intense since the war started, and we hope that all parties involved soon enough prioritize peace and work towards a resolution. In the meantime, the international community's call for humanitarian aid is crucial in supporting those affected by the crisis. Well, let's take a look at the former president of Ivory Coast, Laurent Gbagbo, to contest for 2025 election. Former President Laurent Gbagbo of Ivory Coast has agreed to represent his party in the upcoming 2025 elections. Katina Cohn, the spokesperson for Gbagbo's party, the African People's Party, Côte d'Ivoire PAI,
shared the news after a meeting of the party's Central Committee. Gbagbo, who was acquitted by the International Criminal Court in 2019, returned to Ivory Coast in 2021. Although he lost control of the Ivorian Popular Front, the IPF, while in prison, he still has a strong and loyal support base. The next election in Ivory Coast is expected to take place in October 2025, and it remains to be seen if President Alassane Ouattara will run for re-election. Well, now let's get to see what is happening. Before we get to see what is happening on the global scene, let's take a break.
Meanwhile, news across the globe, Russia has completed the production of the Yenisei autonomous target identification system and the Vadal radar system amid the mounting threat posed by Ukrainian UAVs and long-range missiles. The completion of the autonomous target identification system and the radar systems was communicated to Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu by the Director General of the Army's Research and Production Assistance, Gennady Bendersky, on March 6th. Shoigu was on a visit to inspect the fulfillment of the state's defense order by Hamas Anti-Cooperation. The Director General said that the company had developed new means of combating unmanned aerial vehicles, which were currently undergoing factory tests. While the Yenisei autonomous target designation supports the operation of the S-400 anti-aircraft missile system, the Vadal radar system detect UAS.
It deploys K-16 FA-50 to shoot down North Korean ballistic missiles. In the aerial exercise involving 10 fighter jets, the South Korean Air Force, the ROCAF, KF-16 and FA-50 aircraft launch air-to-air missiles to shoot down drones acting as proxy ballistic missiles launched by Pyongyang. Meanwhile, Russia is producing 3 times more artillery shells than US and Europe for Ukraine. Russia appears on track to produce nearly 3 times more artillery munitions than the US and Europe, a key advantage ahead of what is expected to be another Russian offensive in Ukraine later this year. Russia is producing about 250,000 artillery munitions per month, or about 3 million a year. According to NATO intelligence estimates of Russian defense production shared with CNN as well as sources familiar with Western efforts to arm Ukraine, collectively, the US and Europe have the capacity to generate only about 1.2 million munitions annually to send to Kyiv, a senior European intelligence official said this to CNN.
Well, as if that was not all, the U.S. military set a goal to produce 100,000 rounds of artillery a month by the end of 2025, which is less than half of the Russian monthly output, and even that number is now out of reach with $60 billion in Ukraine funding stored in Congress. A senior army official told reporters last week. And in BRICS, Russia diplomat Yuri Ushakov confirmed that BRICS might not change its name even after the recent expansion. He explained that the bloc would keep the name unchanged as it is an alliance that is well recognized in the world. The diplomat emphasized that BRICS will continue using the same name even after new countries join the bloc through expansion. The next summit is scheduled to be held in October this year in the Kazan region of Russia. The 16th BRICS summit could also see the group indicating many other new developing countries via expansion.
Well, China says it's worried about the return of Trump, but it also sees opportunities if he wins.
In tariffs and restrictions, we will phase out imports of all essential goods from China, and we will bring those jobs and factories back to South Carolina and our other great states. And I will force the Chinese to sell any holdings in the United States that put our national security at risk. You have to do that. I took in hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes and tariffs from China, brought in businesses and brought them back from China like nobody's ever seen before. It's never been done. No other president has ever done anything like it. No other president has ever taken in 10 cents from China. It was always, oh, they're a developing nation. They say they're a developing nation. So on trade deals and all of this, they just rip us off. Nobody's ever ripped us off. But other countries rip us off also. But nobody's ever ripped us off like China. When I got in 507 billion, with a B, billion, in deficits with China. Think of it. Not even sustainable. But this is why we have $32 trillion in debt. When you think about it, much of it's owed to China, which is interesting. We'll have to work that out. I can see a nice swap there. You know, you've screwed us for about 30 years. Let's negotiate that debt.
Oh, well, as Americans bustle through key political moments last week with votes casted Super Tuesday ballot and President Joe Biden laying out his national priorities in the State of the Union address, China was busy conducting the largest annual showing of its own political process. In Beijing, where thousands of delegates from around the country convened for a largely ceremonial meeting to rubber stamp a yearly agenda set by the Communist Party-controlled government, the focus was on domestic concerns, from economic goals to hailing the leadership of Xi Jinping.
Oh, well. Good thing we still have our mother in the studio, and she's been with us from the beginning of the show. And right, before my patients, thank you so much for being part of the show tonight. Before we let you go, we still have one more round with you. Would want you to see this video, and right after that, we'll be back to you.
You are the living God. Oh. There's no one like you. Ekueme, 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 ekueme. You are the living God. Oh. There's no one like you. Ekueme, 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 ekueme. You are the living God. Oh. There's no one like you. La, 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 la. Ma, la, 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 ma, la, 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 la. You are the living God. Oh. There's no one like you. Ma, la, 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 la. La, 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 so, na, yeah, hello, na, 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 no. There's no one like you. You're my healer, you are my keeper, my restorer, my life keeper. Hey, you are my promoter. You are my defender. You are the living God. Oh, it's in no one. Okachi, Ekuwebe, Ihiburu Kinebe. Olori, Olori. Munasiam. Me the whole world lost you. How is it happen for life? They want to kill we. They want to kill we. The bullet that is used for we, for civilian them. Me the word is him.
Women generally bear the brunt of any war, and the women of the Southern Cameroons are no different. The cries of our people became apparent from this senseless war started by dictator Paul Biya, and the book Echoes of Women's Tears became inevitable. In March 2018, 3 years ago, a consortium of like-minded Amazonian revolutionary women decided to narrate through their different lenses a 21st century genocide in their homeland, the former British Southern Cameroons.
I was honored to read these deeply moving accounts by women who witnessed and endured such devastation. They courageously recounted their stories in this collection with the hope that by sharing their experiences, it would shed light on these injustices and help bring about the needed changes to create a more just, hopeful, and humane future in Southern Cameroon.
Indeed, the plight of Amazonia succinctly showcased in this epoch-thrilling script. Echoes of Women's Tears, authored by 15 love-driven mothers, sisters, and proud daughters of Amazonia. This is My Story by Emma Endele. My Amber Story by Gertrude Kisa. Concealing the Genocide by Rasha Ita Tima. Trying to Make Sense of It All by Dorothy Ngwa. A Cry from Amazonia by Eli Jambele. Recovering Its Lost History by Beverly Lekunze. In the Line of Duty by Anando. Bye Bye Dictator Biya by Mary Muma. A Change of Heart by Patience Abiodi.
An agreement was made in an African land. The agreement was broken, and then genocide came, ravaging all people, all ages. No peace, only fear. Homes and whole villages were burnt to the ground.
These personal stories speak to the desperation of Southern Cameroonian women and the loss of hope in any peaceful and equitable resolution short of independence. These women mostly started out wanting solutions within the union with French-speaking Cameroon, but these hopes have been dashed by the French-speaking government.
And from the depths of their hearts, through the drops of their tears, a 21st century genocide in the former British Southern Cameroons has an honest record on black and white. From Cameroon to Amazonia by Iya Mariantando. Why I joined Amazonian Restoration Movement by Aringwa. Why and how I got involved in the struggle by Mata She. The Never-Ending Nightmare by Victory Nyakni. Standing Tall for Amazonia by Comfort. No one should ever take away your identity by Mado. A Letter to Paul Biya by Dorothy Mufo. And endorsed by the Department of Women's Services of the Federal Republic of Amazonia. So it was compiled by Dr. Patience Abiodo.
This true story is told from the point of view of first-hand witnesses. The story is about now, and it must be shared to change. Share it. This book is important.
I hope that you'll share this work with others in the spirit of working toward peace and justice for all God's children.
The Department of Women's Services of the Federal Republic of Amazonia is excited about this project and thrilled to launch it on July 18, 2021, Nelson Mandela Day. Freedom cannot be achieved unless women have been emancipated from oppression. This is a statement from the wealth of Mandela's wisdom. Our high regard for Nelson Mandela explains why we, the women, believe it is appropriate to launch on this day. The objectives behind this project are threefold. Number one, alert the peoples of the Cameroons about the intricacies of the genocidal onslaught that has befallen our people. Number two, internationalize the plight of our people who have been denied access to their own and oppressed by a tyrannic system, the Franco-Cameroon hegemony. And finally, mobilize resources to assuage the current humanitarian crisis in our land. Be sure to join us, Southern Cameroonian women, on July 18th at 8 p.m. our time for a one-of-a-kind Zoom book launch. Thank you, and God bless you.
Oh, well, Dr. Abiodo, thank you so much for still sticking with us. And sincerest apologies for that technical mix-up there. But somehow we've given you the two videos at once. Wanted you to digest one and then get to feel the other later. But good thing you felt the two videos. But now let's get back to the initial question I was asking about your department encouraging Amazonian women to boycott every activity related to the International Women's Day celebration. Obviously, because of the reasons I stated earlier, because of the pains the women, the girls, the ladies face on a regular basis. Now, can you reiterate why and what do you hope to achieve with the silent protest, which we have also seen from the news from the home front?
Thank you, Onye. Let's think about it. What is really the purpose of International Women's Day? In short, in brief, it's a day that the accomplishments of women are celebrated. It's a day that integral people of communities for their social contributions, for their economic contributions, for their academic contributions in all facets of community building, of nation building, and in the international arena. The videos we just saw is for every Southern Cameroonian woman, every Amazonian woman, to reflect and wonder that should you really feel comfortable to celebrate a day when your mothers are digging graves for their sons and husbands, should you really feel comfortable to celebrate International Day when your children have no hope for the future because of a regime that has strangled you in every sense of the word? Should you really feel comfortable to celebrate International Women's Day when your children are being killed, your young girls, your sisters, you yourself have been raped just because you're a Southern Cameroonian, just because you're a woman? You know, before you showed a video of some women in Douala in black telling the world why they don't feel like they can celebrate International Women's Day. And they are in a better situation than Southern Cameroonian women, than Ambazonian women. So if they, who have more opportunities in Douala and Yaoundé, feel that way, what more of us that live in the villages, that our farms have been burnt down, we cannot grow crops, that you mentioned in the beginning that there will be a problem, agricultural problem, because of food being not being available because we don't farm as much as we used to. So these are all reasons why it is difficult for Southern Cameroonian, for Ambazonian women to be able to think of this day other than a day of mourning, other than a day of pain, because in fact, the theme for this year, 2024 International Women's Day, is inspiring inclusion. Inspiring inclusion, or inspire inclusion, whatever you want to choose. What are we inspiring in our women? They have no opportunities. Their children are either killed or locked up in jails with no prospects of being released anytime soon. They themselves do not have the opportunities. But mind you that the Southern Cameroon that we knew, that I was growing up, we had women that were in the forefront of education. We had women that were great nurses, women that were home builders, homemakers. All those opportunities are gone. You cannot inspire inclusion in a society where the dominant sex, women make more of the population than men, but they don't have the opportunities because you have the very corrupt La Republic government's knee on their necks. We cannot breathe. We cannot breathe. So my dear sisters, I applaud those of you who stayed home on March 8th. I applaud those of you who will not just go out because you want to seek a few dollars from the mayor encouraging you to go march. I applaud those of you who stayed home and ignored that call. And know that the government of Southern Cameroon, Ambazonia, we will have International Women's Day that you will be proud of. Not something that you'll be bribed to go celebrate. We'll have International Women's Day that you, your children, will, because they have been included, will be proud of, and not something that somebody will force you to participate in. That video that we saw that shows all the ills that have been perpetuated on our people should really make every Southern Cameroonian Ambazonian, including those, or particularly those who are on the fence, particularly those who are living in their comforts in La République du Cameroon, it should really make them realize that, something is awry, something is very wrong, and that they need to do what they can do as much as possible to free Ambaland so that we can go home and build a nation that when it's time for International Women's Day, The women will be proud to hold flags to march. The men will be there supporting the women. Those videos are very painful, and they are reminders that La République du Cameroun and Ambazonia will only live side by side, preferably as good neighbors. Thank you so much.
Thanks, talking about the Amazonian woman and you being the leader of the Amazonian woman, what would you say is the role of the Amazonian woman as concerns the ongoing conflict and prospects of Amazonia winning?
Yes, let me answer that by going back to the book Echoes of Women's Tears, which you showed in the video. So this was the picture you showed in the video, Echoes of Women's Tears. We planned, or there are plans already on the way to have a second edition of this book. And I believe that one chapter, or at least one chapter in that book, will be dedicated to answer the question that you just asked. Because the Southern Cameroonian Amazonian woman cannot live to the fullest potential, to their fullest potential under this scenario. Most of our women right now are helping, taking care of their sons and daughters that are ASA, Ambazonia State Army, by providing them with nourishment, clothing, housing. They are teaching our kids, future generations, reminding them of our history. Their hands are tied to do more because they cannot come out and publicly denounce La République du Cameroun like those of us living in the diaspora can do freely, because there's freedom of speech, because they will be arrested, tortured, and killed. You know that in the United States of America right now, there's a president, President Biden. But people have the freedom of speech to walk on the street and say, oh, I don't want President Biden. I want President X. I want President Y. That's freedom of speech. We don't have that in La République du Cameroun. If you were to dare say that in public, that you don't want beer, you will be gone. So our women do not have those rights and privileges that are to be given to every human being. The worst case scenario is the raping of our children. That is the lowest thing you can do to a child, to rape her. You make her lose her self-worth, which is such an important part of somebody, having self-worth, having confidence. You deprive them of that. And the sad thing is that these men who do such cruel acts have daughters, have wives themselves. And you wonder why they would do something like that on another human being who could very well be their own child. So we, as Southern Cameroonians, Amazonian women in the diaspora, we will be writing another edition of Echoes of Women's Tears, Part 2, in order to tell our stories so that future generations will never forget what really happened, so that future generations will be brave enough to withstand anything that La République du Cameroun can dish on them. Because the final run is for us to live, I said that before, as good neighbors, preferably, but as neighbors anyhow. Thank you so much.
To Dr. Patience Abiedu, you just talked about the next edition. Did you meet the first objective? Did you meet the objective with the first edition of the book, Echoes of Women's Tears? And is that why there is a second edition? And when should we expect this next edition you just talked about?
Yes, the first edition, the main objective was to tell our stories for the international community to understand that this is a war that women are bearing the brunt, as in the case with any other war. That although Southern Cameroon's Ambazonia is a small country, we are a jewel that is lost in West Africa, and we don't want to be forgotten. So yes, quite a few people in the international community who knew nothing about Southern Cameroons bought this book, and now they know something about Southern Cameroons. The goal of the second edition is really to continue that story, because a lot has happened from when the first edition was published till now. The story has grown longer and more convoluted, and putting it in print will stand the test of time, because our children and great-grandchildren will learn the true story of what really happened during the Southern Cameroon's journey to liberation. Because we are now a government. We were not a government when we wrote that book. We were an interim government. Now we're a government. And everything that has transpired from then till now has to be documented in that book. And our goal is that the international community will understand that these people are determined. The women are determined. You know, when we celebrate International Women's Day, there's a saying from Angeline Jolie, pardon me. I think she mentioned something that a strong woman, we have to celebrate International Women's Day because the women are strong and they are the backbone of every community. I forgot the exact saying of what she said, but I just want to say that women are the foundation of the home. Women are the foundation of the community. Women are the foundation of the nation. And without them, nothing will run smoothly. So we want to put that in print. And you ask when it will go out. We're just in the first phase of getting the writers. By the end of April, or by the end of this month, everyone who wants to be a writer would have already put their name down and contact the right people in charge. And then we intend to start writing in April, and our goal is sometimes, hopefully by the end of this year, to have the book out. But I cannot make any promises because it really depends on all the different writers, how committed they are. But we believe that latest 2025, the books will be on the shelf for everybody to see.
Well, it's highly interesting to see the history documented for future generations to make a reference to. So we applaud you, your team, and everyone making efforts to document the history of Ambazonian. It's highly recommended, and we appreciate your efforts sincerely.
Certainly, and it's the eyes in and it's what is happening in the eyes of the women that are living the story, and that's why it's really unique, because they are living in the moment and seeing what is happening to our people. And those painful videos that he showed that will never really get out of our mind, that is really cemented in our core, makes us feel as strongly as ever that we need to put this on paper.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Ma Abiedu, for being on the show. Your patience is worthy of emulation. We hope to have you once more whenever we want your presence.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Ms. Onye.
All right, viewers. Well, tonight on Undaunted, we've had the pleasure of having Dr. Patience Abiedu in the studio. So do well to ensure you join us tomorrow on Undaunted for many more reports from the home front and across the globe. From all of us here in Undunke Studios, we say thank you for being part of the show this evening.
All right,
See
we're
you
leaving
tomorrow.
now with ABC Amber TV images.